The Georgia judge overseeing the criminal election interference case against Donald Trump has ruled that District Attorney Fani Willis can stay, but on the condition that her ex-boyfriend withdraws from her prosecution team. The judge says there is no conflict of interest stemming from their romantic relationship, but the relationship had, quote, the appearance of impropriety. The choice is now with Willis. Either she must step down or her deputy Nathan Wade must step down. If Wade steps down, the case can resume with minimal interruption. If Willis steps down, have to find a new DA, and the criminal case against Donald Trump will be delayed. Tamar Hallerman is a senior reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She's been following all of this, and she joins me now. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I will confess, from here in Canada, it is very difficult to follow the ins and outs of all of the former president's legal disputes. So walk us through the significance of today's ruling by this judge.
This was a real inflection point in this case, which is, at least the investigation was launched more than 3 years ago. There was an indictment last August that led to felony criminal charges against the former president and 18 others, alleging that they engaged in a racketeering conspiracy to overturn the results of Georgia's 2020 election. But for the past 2 months, the case has turned into a sideshow of sorts, with the central problem being the DA and her love life. And the attorneys who brought this said that she had an improper conflict of interest financially. They pointed to trips that she took with her top prosecutor in this case. He ended up paying for a lot of it, and they said it created an untenable financial conflict of interest. They sought to have her removed, and this ruling today kind of splits the baby. On the one hand, the judge says he's not quite willing to remove the DA from this case, but gives her the choice. Either you can stay or you get rid of your ex-boyfriend, the top prosecutor on this case. And about an hour ago, just before I got on this program, the DA announced the resignation of Nathan Wade. So she will be staying on the case and things will be moving forward.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question of, do we know what's going to happen here? So obviously DA Willis is staying. Will she prosecute this case? Will she designate somebody else? Do you know how that may go in terms of process from here?
She's had a team of about a dozen people who have been working this case, including Nathan Wade. It's unclear whether she would elevate one of those other folks to a more senior role. He was doing a lot of the organizational work on this team, whether she'd seek to bring in somebody from the outside, but there's also many other competent attorneys who've been working on this case from the beginning. So she has a real choice to make. We've seen her here and there in the courtroom. She's even taken the opportunity to argue in front of the judge once or twice, but for the most part, she really has left it up to Nathan Wade and others on her team to do her bidding on this case, and I expect she will appoint somebody else to fill those shoes.
Okay, so what does this mean for timing? Because if the DA stays in place and the team is broadly unchanged except for the head person, not that replacing Nathan Wade is necessarily an easy thing, does this mean we can get to this trial before the election? Would it push it to after the election? What's your sense of how this plays out?
Timing at this point is extremely uncertain. The DA's team had wanted to begin a trial in August, but that was seeming distant even before this whole 2-month disqualification fight happened, just really because of the other cases on Donald Trump's calendar, as well as our elections here coming up. Now, it's possible that defense attorneys who lost with this ruling today will seek to appeal the case, and that could also lead to delays, although at this point it seems like things will be able to move forward, but we are waiting to see what the next steps may be.
Okay, so still lots of drama to happen inside courtrooms in Georgia. How does this affect things electorally in Georgia? It went blue for the first time in decades. Last election, Joe Biden beat Trump by about 12,000 votes. And strange things are happening, right? Nikki Haley drops out and still gets like 77,000 votes in the Republican primary. What's the dynamic in Georgia as a state and how it might go in the presidential election in your sense?
Well, it really depends on where you are. Outside of Atlanta, Georgia's still a pretty darn conservative place. And you see it when people like Donald Trump come into town and they go to some smaller cities. He was in Rome, Georgia last weekend, where thousands of people came and were laughing and booing when he was talking about Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. But here in Atlanta has become very Democratic. And more notably, over the last couple of years, the last 10 years or so, the suburbs suburbs around Atlanta, which used to be pretty solidly Republican, have now shifted not only purple, but even leaning slightly blue toward the Democrats. So those are the people we're going to be watching in this race in 2024, because their mood in the suburbs will probably have a lot to say about who ultimately wins here in the fall.
Yeah, and do we know, and forgive me if you don't know this, like, is that Nikki Haley in the primaries before she dropped out, and I guess after she dropped out, she was doing well in sort of like college-educated cities and suburbs. Is that where she has her strength, in Atlanta and the Atlanta suburbs? I mean, is that sort of a cohort that could shift away from Trump maybe in the fall? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That suburban population tends to be more educated, traditionally has gone to the GOP, but over the last 10 years, it's become very, very diverse, and moods have really soured on Donald Trump. He lost them in 2020, and it'll be a real question about whether they might come out for him in 2024. Some people either skipped the presidential race, voted for Republicans down ballot. Others held their nose and voted for Joe Biden, even if he didn't match them ideologically. And we'll just have to wait and see in terms of this case. At this point, it's been more of a talking point. But it's an awful long time between now and November, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yes, and at this rate, who knows what can happen between now and then. Tamar Hallerman with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, thanks for joining us today.
Anytime.